The chief next door. Some people mistake a quiet life for a weak one. Arthur Sterling had earned his quiet 23 years in law enforcement, the last 4 as police chief of Oak Ridge County. He had seen everything the job could throw at a person, and he had handled all of it. Now he just wanted a house with a decent garage, a clean driveway, and enough peace to finally enjoy the one thing he had spent a decade restoring, a 1969 Ford Mustang, midnight blue. Every bolt, every wire, every inch of chrome brought back to life by his own hands. He moved into Pine Grove Estates on a Saturday. By Sunday, neighbors had already stopped by with handshakes and welcome baskets. It felt like exactly the kind of neighborhood he had been looking for. Then he met Brenda. Brenda Vance was the HOA president, a position she treated less like a volunteer role and more like a divine appointment. She had held the position for 6 years. She knew every bylaw, every subsection, every footnote. And she deployed them with the enthusiasm of someone who had been waiting their whole life for exactly this much authority. She arrived at Arthur's garage 3 days after he moved in. Her son Kyle, 16 and visibly uncomfortable, trailed behind her like a reluctant shadow. Arthur was polishing the Mustang when her shadow fell across the garage floor. "I don't believe we've been introduced," she said, her tone carrying the specific warmth of someone who does not intend to be warm. Brenda Vance, HOA president. Arthur Sterling. He offered his hand. She glanced at it briefly, then returned her attention to the car. "That vehicle," she said, producing a laminated booklet from her bag, "may be in violation of Section 3, subsection C of our community standards. All vehicles must maintain a contemporary appearance appropriate to the neighborhood." Aesthetic? She looked at the Mustang the way someone looks at a stain on a carpet. "This appears to be quite old." Arthur looked at his car, then back at Brenda. "It's a fully restored 1969 Mustang," he said patiently. "Mechanically, it's in better condition than anything currently on the market." "Rules exist for a reason," Brenda replied, snapping the booklet shut. "You have 48 hours to either garage it permanently or arrange for its removal. Have a pleasant evening." She turned and left. Kyle mouthed a silent apology before following her. Arthur stood in his driveway for a long moment. He had once talked a man off a bridge at 2 in the morning. He had negotiated with people who had considerably more leverage than a laminated rulebook. He decided to keep the car in the garage and let the whole thing dissolve quietly. It did not dissolve quietly. The following afternoon, Arthur needed to run a brief errand. He backed the Mustang out of the garage, no more than 20 feet into his own driveway, when a modified silver hatchback came tearing around the corner at a speed that had no business existing in a residential neighborhood. The driver overcorrected, came within a foot of the Mustang's front corner, and swerved past with a kind of casual aggression. That suggested this was a regular occurrence. It was Kyle. He threw a look at Arthur as he passed, not apologetic, not startled, just annoyed. As though Arthur and his car were the inconvenience. Arthur put the Mustang in park. He sat for a moment. He was a police chief. He understood the value of proportionate responses. He would speak to Brenda directly, calmly, parent to neighbor. He knocked on her door. An hour later, she answered it with the expression of someone who had already decided the conversation was going to be irritating. "Your son came very close to hitting my vehicle," Arthur said. "He was significantly over the residential speed limit. I wanted to bring it to your attention before." "Before what?" Brenda cut in. "Before you harass a teenager for driving down a public street?" Kyle is a careful and responsible driver. If anyone is a danger on these roads, it is you and that antique you insist on parading around. The door closed. The next morning, Arthur found his Mustang covered in eggs. He stood in the driveway for a long time. Not angry, or rather, not only angry, mostly tired. He had spent his entire adult life dealing with people who pushed situations further than they needed to go. And he recognized exactly where this one was headed. He cleaned the car. He went inside. He made coffee. Was pouring his second cup when Brenda appeared in his driveway again. Kyle beside her, working very hard on an expression of innocence. "I have had enough," she announced, loud enough for the entire street to hear. "My son witnessed you this morning, driving recklessly up and down this road before sunrise, disturbing the entire neighborhood. I am calling the police, and I expect you to still be standing right there when they arrive." Arthur set down his coffee mug. "Go ahead," he said. Something in his voice gave her a brief pause. But Brenda Vance had not maintained 6 years of neighborhood authority by backing down. She dialed. She reported. She described a hooligan, a menace, an unsafe vehicle, a public disturbance. She hung up and stood with her arms folded, wearing the expression of someone who has just played their final card and knows it is the winning one. Kyle smirked. They waited. 2 patrol units arrived 7 minutes later. Sergeant Maya Reynolds stepped out of the first car, looked across the driveway, and stopped. A slow smile crossed her face. "Chief Sterling." She gave a brief nod of genuine respect. "Didn't realize this was your neighborhood. Everything all right?" The smirk left Kyle's face. Brenda's arms slowly uncrossed. Arthur looked at her calmly. "Sergeant, this is the woman who just filed the report. I'll let her explain the situation in her own words." He paused. "She should also be aware that her son vandalized my vehicle yesterday morning and that I have a neighbor's security camera that covers my entire driveway." Brenda opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Sergeant Reynolds turned to her with the polite but immovable professionalism of someone who has done this many times before. "Ma'am, filing a false report is a chargeable offense. So is vandalism. I'm going to need you and your son to come with me so we can take your statements." Formally, Kyle sat down on the curb without being asked. Arthur attended the next HOA meeting. He brought copies of 3 things: the city ordinances governing homeowner association authority, the state statutes on vehicle classification and collector car status, and a printed summary of the previous week's incidents, including case numbers. He did not raise his voice once during the meeting. The board voted unanimously to review and revise their vehicle policy before the end of the month. Brenda sat at the end of the table and said very little. The other members, Arthur noticed, seemed to find this as surprising as it was refreshing. On his way home, he stopped in the driveway and rested his hand on the Mustang's hood for a moment. The neighborhood was quiet, the kind of quiet that comes after something has been settled. Not the fragile quiet that precedes a problem, but the solid, earned quiet that follows one. Arthur went inside, poured himself a glass of water, and sat on the porch. Some people mistake a quiet life for a weak one. It is a mistake that rarely gets made twice. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe to Caring Conflict for more. See you next time.